Is the Book of Boba Fett a dig at wokeness?
Mr. Reagan.
Okay, so there's this new show on Disney Plus, a new Star Wars show. It's called The Book of Boba Fett, and it's about the adventures of the legendary bounty hunter from Empire Strikes Back and the Return of the Jedi, Boba Fett. Now, ordinarily, my pop culture videos are about the wokeness of Hollywood, the things I despise, the things that I think need to change. But in this case, I'm going to talk about something I think is good. Now, in the case of Boba Fett, there certainly has been a woke history of sorts. Originally, Boba Fett was played by a white Englishman, Jeremy Bulloch, and he was emulating Clint Eastwood.
What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me.
The Empire will compensate you if he dies. Put him in.
But then, for the prequels, George Lucas changed Boba Fett to an actor of Maori descent, presumably for the sake of diversity. Now, I hate changes like this, and I find the woke trend to race swap characters away from being white detestable. But few people seem to care about this at the time, and I've not really heard any criticism since. And, I think that's probably because people just like the actor, Tamara Morrison. And fair enough, if you've got charisma enough to win over fans, so be it, you deserve to take over the part. And I'll say this, I do like this actor. I like his voice, I like his look. He's got a lot going for him. This is him talking in an interview, so you can see what I mean.
We go on a journey together. Very good question there. And it's like a Remington and Steele. I don't know if you remember that program.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It's a bit of that. And then it's also sometimes a little bit, sometimes in a drama, you need someone to talk to. And it was nice talking to my bantha, but it was really nice talking to my assassin friend as well.
See, this guy, he's kind of awesome. So, another woke moment in the saga of Boba Fett was the release of a toy spaceship. Now, Boba Fett's spaceship is called Slave One. The word slave is naturally going to be problematic to leftists because everything is problematic to leftists. But the word slave is naturally going to be associated with African slaves in the American South by basically everybody with zero knowledge of European history. Because, the word slave is actually derived from Slav and the Slavic people. These were Europeans who were enslaved primarily by Muslims in North Africa, in Spain, and in the Near East. Now, this etymology of slave is disputed by some historians who, I think, probably have a political motive. But the point is that there were European slaves long before there were black African slaves in America. And the word slave existed long before the African slave trade. So for leftists to be hypersensitive about that word just exposes their ignorance of history. In any case, Disney, bowing to the gods of wokeness, have decided that the word slave is verboten, and they have neglected to put the name of Boba Fett's spaceship on the toy's packaging. It's actually pretty funny. Instead of calling it Slave One, they've simply called it Boba Fett's Starship. Hilarious. We can't confront innocent children with words that might trigger a recollection of history. They're just children, for Pete's sake. Now, I suspect that had they put Slave One on the box, no one would have said anything at all. But by not putting it on, they drew all this attention to the fact that the ship was called Slave One, the very thing that they were hoping to avoid. So in the shadow of these, I'd say, fairly significant bows to wokeness, why do I think that the Book of Boba Fett is so refreshingly not woke? That in one moment. First, something to sell you, I have.
Something to sell you, I have.
Not a great impression, I admit. Right now, stocks are at an all-time high. The economy is roaring. Houses are selling and weak interest rates are at zero. And the government just printed $5 trillion. What could possibly go wrong? Meanwhile, consumer confidence has hit a 10-year low, and inflation hit 6.8%, with parts of the U.S. seeing rates as high as 8%. Something is not adding up. So what can you do? You can play it safe. Putting some of your assets into precious metals will keep your money away from the volatility of the markets and will protect you from inflation. Investing in precious metals will let you sleep at night. This month, Noble Gold is giving away a free America the Beautiful solid silver 5-ounce coin with any qualifying plan that you start. So talk to an expert at Noble Gold and they'll run you through your options to to keep your money safe. No pressure, no hassling, no call centers, just a chance to speak to somebody who knows what they're talking about. And how refreshing would that be? Start by calling 877-646-5347 or visit their website at noblegoldinvestments.com. Okay, so from one ad to the next, I'm going to play for you excerpts from one of the trailers for the Book of Boba Fett.
I know that you sit on the throne of your former employer. Jabba ruled with fear. I intend to rule with respect.
If you had spoken such insolence to Jabba, he'd have fed you to his menagerie.
Please, speak freely.
Speak freely. Wow, what a refreshing thing to hear. Now, the clips that I played cut together in this trailer sound to me like an advocacy of individual liberty opposed to the tyranny of a fascistic state. And though the left has been calling Republicans, and especially Donald Trump, fascists for years, the truth is Republicans tend to rule with respect for individual liberty. No masks, no lockdowns, no vaccine mandates. Democrats, on the other hand, tend to rule with fear. Fear of COVID, fear of losing your job, fear of a knock on the door from the FBI if you dare protest at the Capitol. So I do think that Jon Favreau, the creator of the Book of Boba Fett, is using this show to talk about the current state of politics in America. Science fiction has a long tradition of being used to express political ideas using fantastical metaphor, and I believe that that's what's being done here. But I also think that there's another parallel, a more personal parallel, and that is what's been going on with Jon Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy over at Disney. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't think so. You see, I realized a while back that Jon Favreau, the creator of The Mandalorian and now the Book of Boba Fett, is a conservative, or at least he's a libertarian. And this revelation I found thrilling. I like Favreau's work, and I always postulated that if a conservative were allowed to create films in the midst of the current flood of wokeness drowning Hollywood, that it would be like a massive life raft. Everyone who hates what Hollywood produces would jump on board, and maybe Hollywood could be saved. And this is precisely what happened with Jon Favreau's Star Wars and The Mandalorian. I've mentioned her before, but if you're unaware of the feminist monster Kathleen Kennedy, she was the personal assistant of Steven Spielberg. Over the years, this detestable woman gained the trust of Spielberg and his good friend George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. And when Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, he appointed Kathleen Kennedy president of Lucasfilm. She had tricked Lucas into believing that she could be trusted to preserve his vision of the franchise. This was a huge mistake. Kennedy openly declared that Star Wars was going to become a feminist screed, and she even printed t-shirts stating that the Force is female. Now, the original Star Wars trilogy is a cultural phenomenon, a modern masterpiece, a mythological saga that is revered almost as much as those of our ancient ancestors. And to most of us men who watched these movies as a boy, Star Wars is a very special part of our childhood. But Kathleen Kennedy saw the popularity of Star Wars merely as a platform from which she could preach her special brand of woke feminism. And this crude act of cultural vandalism nearly destroyed the Star Wars franchise entirely. But then, Jon Favreau came along, and he wrote, and he directed, and he produced a little project called The Mandalorian.
So, I have kids. I showed them the original trilogy on my VHS tapes that I bought 30 years ago, and they loved Star Wars. It was so great. It was like, yes, I have a Star Wars loving family. This is fantastic. So Disney buys Lucasfilm, and I'm excited. And then Force Awakens trailers hit the internet, and I am so excited I can barely breathe. Especially at that shot of the X-Wings skimming over the water. Oh, seeing Han Solo, Princess, or General Leia, and there was no Luke, and I was like, oh, they're probably just saving him for introduction into the middle of the movie so that, all the fans will just go wild screaming when he shows up. But no, Luke doesn't even have one speaking line in the first movie. Okay, so we went in knowing that Han Solo was going to die. So we're like, okay, Han Solo is going to go out in a blaze of glory. He's going to sacrifice his life, saving his friends from this terrible threat. No, instead he's lightsaber fodder for his estranged son. So the kids and I are walking back to the car, and my son turns to me and he says, "I hate Star Wars." That right there is the unforgivable sin, because Disney made my son hate Star Wars. Today I am watching Season 1, Episode 2 of The Mandalorian, and I am very excited because the first episode was the first Star Wars content in a very long time that I have really enjoyed. It was the first Star Wars that made me feel like that 6-year-old kid watching Star Wars in the theaters for the very first time back in 1977. Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, George Lucas. Thank you so much.
Now, when Jon Favreau came on board to Lucasfilm to produce this show, The Mandalorian, he was already a well-respected director from having directed Iron Man, the Christmas movie Elf, and for having written the film Swingers. Jon Favreau was well known by the Hollywood elite as a brilliant filmmaker. So Kathleen Kennedy probably didn't think too much about Favreau producing a new Star Wars show, except, hey, if it's good, it's going to make me look good. But she didn't count on The Mandalorian being so epically popular that it would actually expose her Star Wars efforts as the dismal failures that they were. But that is exactly what happened. The Mandalorian was so beloved, and it was such a contrast to the woke nonsense that she had produced, that instead of making her look brilliant for hiring Favreau, it exposed her as the creatively bankrupt activist that she truly is. And this infuriated her. Instead of congratulating Favreau, jumping on board with his vision and abandoning the woke crap that had nearly destroyed Star Wars, Kennedy decided to wage war against Favreau and his supporters within Disney. This civil war was reported by several sources within the company, and in the end, Favreau won. It's been reported that although Kennedy is still the president of Lucasfilm, she's been entirely stripped of power. Now Favreau is running the show.
I know that you sit on the throne of your former employer.
But that civil war was bloody. A lot of damage was done to Favreau's creative vision. The most notable casualty was Gina Carano. Gina Carano played a character called Cara Dune on The Mandalorian, and she was so popular that plans had been drawn up to give her her own show on Disney+. It was called Rangers of the New Republic. Well, Gina Carano is a known conservative, and at the time of her growing popularity on The Mandalorian, she was posting provocative conservative memes on Instagram. Provocative purely because they were conservative. This was so triggering to Kathleen Kennedy that Kennedy engaged in a slanderous PR campaign against Gina Carano, distorting Carano's political views and slandering her as anti-Semitic, which was, of course, a despicable lie. But upon that basis, Kathleen Kennedy fired Gina Carano, complicating the future of The Mandalorian and completely derailing the new show, Rangers of the New Republic. Of course, we all heard about this at the time, and Kathleen Kennedy's plan backfired against her, helping Favreau to gain even more favor both within Disney and with the fans. However, that's not to say that Favreau walked away from this battlefield with no hard feelings. I'm sure he still resents Kennedy for what she did, and I suspect that his frustrations were channeled into his writing of this new show, The Book of Boba Fett. After all, the rumor is that while Kennedy ruled with fear, Favreau rules with respect.
Jabba ruled with fear. I intend to rule with respect.
And while Kennedy strove to silence those who disagreed with her political view, Favreau would have his actors and his friends speak freely.
Please, speak freely.
And this wouldn't be the first time that Favreau has criticized those that he works with through a production. In 2014, Favreau made a film called Chef, a film in which a brilliant chef has to deal with an unreasonable restaurant owner who doesn't understand what culinary brilliance is. And this has been interpreted as a metaphor for Favreau trying to direct Iron Man 2, a film in which his creative vision was subverted by creatively bankrupt film producers, namely Kevin Feige. So we do have a precedent for Favreau criticizing the producers that he comes in conflict with. And boy, did he ever come into conflict with the Wicked Witch of Lucasfilm herself, Kathleen Kennedy. And so I don't think the idea that Favreau put his frustrations about Kathleen Kennedy and that whole situation into the story of the Book of Boba Fett, I don't think that's that much of a stretch. In fact, I think this is almost certainly what happened here, and I love it. I do think Boba Fett will be an amazing show, and I'm very much looking forward to episode 2. And I certainly hope that the show will, as I expect, be something of a commentary on the politics of today. I do think that's been hinted at in the trailer, and I do think it may also be something of a dig against the woke fascism of Kathleen Kennedy, which I think is well-deserved. Now, I usually find myself talking about why injecting politics into projects makes them worse, but in this case, I think it's quite a lot of fun. And if this is in fact true, if he is injecting politics into the show, if he is injecting corporate politics over at Disney and Lucasfilm, then we're going to see, right? As we watch new episodes of Boba Fett, we will certainly find out how well this can work. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that is not so. Good night.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals. There's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty.